I'll call the meeting to order. And we have no public comment. So minutes from June 20th meeting been sent to commission members. And this time, is there any correction?
No, sir. I make a motion that we'll approve the minutes. I'll ask you.
I'll second it. And all those in favor, please raise your right hand. Okay, the minutes are approved. Next on the agenda for approval is emergency response pay. This came out of the emergency management meeting we had last week.
Yes, sir, last Thursday.
And I'll turn that over to Mr. Burrow.
Yes, sir. Like I said, at the Emergency Preparedness Committee meeting last Thursday, we discussed a variety of things, one of which was getting FEMA reimbursements and things of that nature. And one of the things that has caused us problems in the past is not following our written emergency response pay policies. FEMA will only reimburse you for what is written in your policy prior to an event. You can't decide to change your policy midway through and then get reimbursed for that. While we certainly want to compensate our employees fairly for helping us out in those events, we do not want to have FEMA tell us that we're on our own for that if we can all avoid it. So with that being said, historically we have done a variety of different things. We've paid double pay for hours worked. We've paid double pay for 24 hours regardless of hours worked per day. We have not paid salaried personnel additional and things of that nature. But, so there's actually two policies that come into play out of the HR standards of practice. You got section 4.1, which is the attendance and hours worked policy, and section 6.2, which is the pay plan policy. With that being said, we read through this the other day, and a group of us from the senior staff looked at it, and the policy as written, we believe is fair. Now, we do think there are some clarifications needed in a couple of the lines. If you look at beginning in section 4.1, dropping down to the third page of that, beginning with section 11, inclement weather. First of all, there's a reference that needs to be updated there. Those are minor. You'll see a few of those throughout. We won't necessarily go through that, but that's just because as the other policies have been updated, we haven't updated the references in those policies. But the first one here in 11B, you see that it previously stated that administrative leave may be granted for up to 72 hours, which upon discussion with HR and internal staff, we decided we would like to update that to 3 business days to prevent any confusion as to whether that is 72 working hours or 72 clock hours. There was some questions if somebody could come in and say that means that they can get 9 days of administrative leave in an event like that because it's 72 working hours. So we figured 3 business days would eliminate any confusion there. And also, if you have employees, say at the wastewater plant that work 12-hour shifts and at the admin office here work 8-hour shifts, we don't get into a debate of, well, you can only get paid for 24 hours of admin leave, even though my normal schedule is 36 hours over that 3-day period. So going for 3 business days there. On the next page, you'll see a brief correction there that we're suggesting that basically earlier in the policy, you'll see that the administrative leave can be granted by the director based off of his opinion of hazardous conditions. However, the way the policy currently reads, it is the chairman of the commission who determines when the emergency is over. So we decided to be consistent with who decided that there was an emergency and make that who decided there was no longer an emergency. So,
Are you going to use the director or the executive director?
The executive director. We can change that wording to include executive. Throughout the rest of the policy, it's just referred to as director.
Well, we got many directors, though.
We do have many directors. You are correct. I can make that adjustment. Yes, sir. So those are the only changes in the attendance and hours worked policy. I will say, however, if you go back to page 2 of that policy, that we're not suggesting a change here, but letter G of page 2, exempt employees are not eligible to receive overtime pay, as we are all aware. It says, in the policy though, that employees who are required to work beyond normal work hours during a declared state of emergency or a mandatory evacuation will be paid straight time for hours worked over 40. So they will not be getting any sort of premium pay for working additional hours, but if they're here for a 3-day event and they're working 16 hours a day, they will receive straight pay for any hours over 40.
I would like to add to that 40 hours per pay period or work day.
40 hours per week.
Week, yeah.
Yes,
You don't have it displayed there.
Right, 40 hours per week.
Or work, yeah, people, work
So,
week, yeah.
right, if there is a emergency event during a pay period, if you work more than 40 hours during the week that there's
Right, then it's over.
then they'll get the straight time over that. Not just because I worked
Per week,
10 hours on Monday, I get 2 hours of straight time additional if I go home on Friday early.
exactly. I hear you.
All right, and so that's the end of our suggested changes and/or necessary discussion here on section 4, unless there's any questions.
Okay, I guess my first question, can you make the changes before today's meeting? Because this is not on
This is not on the
agenda for today.
agenda for this afternoon. It will be on the agenda if this is approved at the meeting on the 22nd, I believe is the next meeting.
We want to, you could certainly motion to add it to today's agenda if you would like to go ahead and get it wrapped up.
I don't know that it's that,
Well, let's wait for Neil, so let's do it the next one after that, so.
yeah, not push it. But, I would like to go ahead and have a motion to recommend
Sure.
that the changes
Uh,
be noted in today's meeting that this
And I can,
forward to this full commission.
I make a motion that we approve the changes that we made, also the added changes to this, so move, put it like that.
and I'll have the updated changes to y'all
Yes.
by the end of the day tomorrow, so that we'll have that in plenty of time for the next meeting.
I second.
Okay?
All those in favor, please raise your right hand. Motion carried. Okay, the next discussion we're gonna have is the salary survey. Mr. Burrows?
Yes, sir. At the previous HR meeting, we had a discussion with Condrey and Associates, who did the previous salary survey, and the question came up concerning the salary of senior staff members and how we compare to other water and wastewater utilities, not only those that are in large utilities, but those are more that our size and our area. So one of the things we did to compare this, the American Water Works Association puts out a annual compensation survey based off the size of water and wastewater utilities. They have one for small utilities, which is those that have populations less than 10,000, and then they have a medium-sized utility, which is 10,000 to 99,999. One of the questions that particularly Commissioner Harvey raised was it prudent for us to be comparing ourselves to Jacksonville and Savannah, given that the amount of customers that those folks have to pay those bills? So we purchased the one that was the medium-sized salary. Given the population here, we have 30,000 accounts. Roughly 2.5 people per account would be 60,000 people that would be here. So this fits us perfectly. In that, there were 290 utilities surveyed. 51% are structured like we are as a board. 39% are still part of the city or county governments. And 10% of the people would be different structures. Some of that is private. Some of that is more of a for-profit entity. So just as a note, the data in this survey, which is the most recent one they have, the 2019 survey is not out yet, was collected prior to March 1st of 2018. So the annual, from the survey across the utilities of our size, the overall salaries are increasing at a rate of 2.8% annually over the past 5 years. That is from the, that survey. So the way we looked at this, identified the current senior level positions we have here at Joint Water and Sewer, and then looked at the AWWA study includes job specifications and titles for a number of positions that can be compared to. So I pulled the positions from the AWWA book that had this responsibilities that our staff have, whether the title was the exact same or not. And then looked at the data two ways, one of them on those operated by boards, and one of them on those with utilities serving 50 to 100,000 people, which fits us, and then compared that to our existing positions. So again, here, it looked at our current senior level positions are those that I looked at the superintendents essentially, the ones that report directly to the office of the director, as well as one additional one that I will go over in a minute. Most of our positions are asked to take on a variety of tasks. Some of them are more singular focused, but most of them have a variety of responsibilities. So the AWWA positions tend to be more specialized as they were provided in the book. So the one thing that was added to this list that is not a superintendent position is the fleet manager position. You'll see down at the bottom of the page that is asterisk. The fleet manager position was included with the facilities position in the AWWA book because it was the facilities and fleet maintenance personnel. So we, to make sure that that was an apples to apples, included the salary for the fleet manager in here as well. So then I pulled the corresponding ones, and one thing you'll notice is there is one more position. There are 12 positions on the table for JWSC and 13 on the AWWA study. But one thing to also note, the systems pumping and maintenance position that we have, there is nothing in the AWWA book that refers to taking care of collection systems, whether that be gravity lines or pump stations. So there's nothing in there. That's just something they did not include in their survey. So you see the positions there that are included. A couple of things to point out here. One, I pulled the ones that were responsible for the same functions, but not if they only had 2 or 3 of them in the entire survey. All of these that were pulled had a considerable number of them included in the survey, so it wasn't just that, you know, one utility in Tennessee had this position, so it's included in here. It's a lot of people that had these things. The water quality and lab manager position, we do not have that position. We task our wastewater manager and our water production manager with managing their individual labs. Also, like I said, the fleet and building maintenance manager positions were combined in the AWWA study. So I pulled the data next on the board-operated utilities, the minimum in the study, the maximum in the study, and then the midpoint for those, and summed the total salaries at the bottom there for you to see the range of what we would be looking at. I did the same thing for the 50 to 100,000 position, and if you'll compare those numbers, they're pretty close. So there's not a huge difference in the salaries for the board operated versus the population look at it. So comparing with the current JWSC positions, again, no systems pumping and maintenance superintendent position in the AWWA study. The AWWA study split the admin and information technology functions into 2 positions. We have that combined into 1 position right now. The purchasing and warehousing responsibilities are split under 2 positions in the AWWA study. We have that under 1 function. And then again, I talked about the laboratory oversight that we handle under the individual managers, and then the fleet maintenance and facilities maintenance combination. So I then added up the pay ranges for our existing positions that were included. I included the systems pumping and maintenance superintendent in here in this math because they are a senior level position for us. Added it up for total salaries for the positions combined with the system pumping superintendent and without. And then the next table you see there actually compares our total salary for the position versus what the board and similar population are. And you see that we compare very favorably to those. We're slightly under in all of the categories, but we're not, it's not exactly like we're significantly under there. That's basically statistically insignificant. So I then did a comparison between the JWSC, the board operated, and the similar population for each individual position. You will see some variations between what our position is paid, both higher and lower than some of the other ones are paid. With that being said, the duties are not exact lineups, so you can't really compare apples to apples in all situations. That's why I think it's best to look at the overall picture of how we're running these positions versus the way the other utilities ran them. So all told, from the AWWA study, it appears that we are well within range for what our salaries should be compared to other utilities that are operated like us and of the same size. We do have some positions that if you look at the individual positions compared to somebody else with that exact job title may appear to be either under or overpaid, but the individual responsibilities don't always match up, and there may be a reason why that under or overpaid shows up because of those responsibility differences. And with that, I will open it up for any questions.
Randy, do they have these broken out into regions too?
Yeah, that's about my question too.
They have data from the individual regions included in the study, but it is not, well, they have it by individual states in the study, but they don't have a summarized in one, like a southeast region or a west region. It's just as utility size. And then some of that is because you get more response from some areas than you do in others. I mean, particularly some of the Midwestern states, there were very little response in there, so it'd be very difficult to produce that study for them.
Well, I think it's a good study, the AWWA survey, but as they take it as a whole aggregate, they take the whole and then break that down. And of course, there'll be some that will be high, there'll be some that will be low.
Absolutely.
So I guess you take an average, and I imagine you would get an average of what it would look like. But we were concerned about, we know notoriously in our area, our geographical location here, that we pay, our salary range are lower. So we was trying to compare ourselves with where we are in our region or our area.
Okay.
Now, I say it may come out the same because of the way they took the survey with the highs and the lows and just got the midpoint or the mid-range. But it still skews us as to, are we really compatible with what's happening in our area, or are we compatible with what's happening overall in the whole United States?
Okay.
I say it may average out just the same, and I think it would merit just the question to find out what people in our geographical area are in comparison to our size as well.
Okay.
And I think that would quell all questions about where we are, where we sit.
I can pull some of that data. I will say some of that data is not readily available.
I understand that. We understand that. So we're not trying to. I'm not trying to say I want that
Right.
this evening or whatever like
Sure.
that. I'm just saying,
I
you
can
know,
look at
that's
that.
something that we need to be looking at. It may be something we look at our next annual survey or looking at our salary upgrade anyhow.
Yes, sir. We can certainly take a look at that prior to any of those discussions taking place. And I can pull that data for you. This was a more industry.
Yeah, and I see that, and I'm saying this is well documented, so it would be a well received survey and that we have here again. But like I said, it's just that one shadow of a doubt. Are we looking at what's happening in our geographical area,
Absolutely.
such as Waycross, Kingsland, Richmond Hill,
Right.
whatever, somebody in that category.
When do you project to start your 2020-21 budget effort?
We will absolutely have it started no later than January. My hope would be to start doing that in November or early December, so that we can
So
not be up against the end of the deadline there.
have this review that Commissioner Harvey's asking for, say, in November?
Absolutely.
That's fine.
Absolutely. At the
That'll
very
work.
least, even if they're not readily available online, we can make phone calls, and if they don't want to provide the information on the phone, we can always make a freedom of information.
You know,
request.
normally HR would always go out and do a
Right.
wage salary survey anyhow. That's what I did every year. And they send out notice to places around who have comparable, grades or whatever like that, skills.
Well, exactly, and I don't think we're gonna run into much of a roadblock with people providing the information.
think
You
so
just
either.
gotta request it from them,
That's true.
you know.
I agree.
GAWP could give you some.
They can probably do a lot of that.
Too.
Yes, sir.
Right.
I can certainly contact them. I actually met with Mike Thomas earlier this week, and so I can see if he has that data.
But thank you for this. This is good to know here. It let us know where we stand, basically nationwide, really.
Okay.
Mike can certainly tell you what he had in Clinton County.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Was this study prepared internally,
Yes, sir.
and do we know anything about benefit comparison?
We did not compare benefits as part of this study. When we spoke with Mr. Condrey at the previous meeting of the HR committee. His statement was, if you're in between 38 and 41% of benefits package compared to salary, you are within range of everybody else. That essentially, you could pay somebody to do a benefit survey for you, but in reality, there's very little difference as far as overall benefit package in many of these locations. 38 to 41%.
38 to 41, and where are we?
We're at 41, 42%, so we're right there, depending on, the recent changes with the insurance. I haven't ran it since we changed the insurance,
And that's 41% of
total compensation.
total comp.
And that's not position by position, that's, take our total benefits, total salaries,
Total salary plus benefits.
plus benefits, right, for every position, I didn't look at,
Benefits divided by total salary plus benefits equals 41%.
that's correct.
Less the commissioner's line item.
Sure. Yes, sir, I did. I did indeed do that.
Any other questions, suggestions? On the salary?
This looks good.
It does,
Like some good information out there.
it does.
Regional would be nice to have.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, sir. We can certainly pull that information for you.
Then, if there's no further discussion on this part, we'll go to the safety stand-down review.
Yes, sir. Last Wednesday, the 31st, we had Safety Stand-Down Day. There were 2 of those meetings just because it's a little difficult to get 100 people in this room. So we split them up, one at 11 and one at 1 o'clock with a lunch break in between. We provided lunches for the staff members for that day, a boxed lunch, and it was a pretty successful event. We had 3 presenters at our event this year. We had Jeffrey Singletary from Teamwork Services. He is our workers' comp representative at Teamwork Services. He went through our injuries and incidents for the reported injuries and incidents for the previous year. We had 21 incidents over the past fiscal year, which is in line with what we had done the previous 2 years. But of particular note, 12 of those 21s were vehicle incidents. So we have had a bad year in terms of vehicles, but as far as everything else, we're actually looking pretty good. Of those 12 vehicle incidents, 6 of them were our fault, 6 of them were not our fault. So kind of split down the middle there. Following Jeffrey's discussion, we had a presentation by a member of the Zenith Corporation that handles our workers' comp insurance. He went through ergonomics, whether you're sitting in an office, riding around in a truck, or sitting on equipment all day, making sure that you're paying attention to what you're doing and reaching for, as well as making sure if you are on a piece of equipment, you don't just sit on it for 8 hours. Let's get off it and walk around and make sure we're not causing ourselves harm in that way as well. Very good presentation there. And then Mr. Charlie Moore came in and did a presentation on active shooter awareness for all of our personnel. Went through some incidents that have recently happened, unfortunately, and discussed those, as well as what to do in the event of an active shooter. The existing slogan that you hear all the time is run, hide, fight. He likes to change that from run, hide, fight, because he said not everybody can run. But what was the first one? It's something defend, deny and defend. I forget what the first one was. Depart, deny, and defend, something of that nature, where basically you don't have to run, just make sure that you are getting away as fast as possible. So it's a very good presentation. He is a colorful individual. He keeps it entertaining for us all. And then at the end, we passed out incentive checks for the safety incentive program that we did. I also notified staff that currently we were only randomly drug testing CDL drivers because it's required by state law. We are now including all of our employees in random drug testing protocols, whether you have a CDL or not. And then we also, after discussions with the safety council that we have here, that's a staff-led group that I am not a part of, the decision was made to eliminate the safety incentive program, but to tie that to your performance evaluation. So safety practices will be included as a line item on the performance reviews. There will not be getting checks for the incentive program anymore, but that could potentially affect whether they get a raise or not for that year if you're not following safety practices.
How did that go across?
About half and half. So a lot of the people appreciated the fact that you're not going to be lumped in with your, say, the meter services works as one group as far as the safety incentive program, and because one person had an accident, they got kicked out of the
Oh,
program.
you give safety points, thing by department?
Well, it's by work group. And if you work on a crew, like a construction crew has 4 people on it, it's easy to separate those out. But it's very difficult to separate out meter readers from each other. So they're all lumped together. So now you're responsible for your own safety incentive instead of one bonehead ruining it for the entire group.
So one person can screw it up for the whole group?
That is correct. That's the way it was currently structured. And we are eliminating that because that is somewhat unfair. And so that went over pretty well, that they weren't going to have their.
So we don't give safety checks to the organization for bringing down our safety percentage or whatever like that? So they don't get it as a whole, just group-wise or department-wise?
No, individual, the way it was currently structured, the individual staff members got a check for the safety incentive, but your safety incentive changed based off the performance of your group, not just your performance.
So the amount of the check changed.
The amount of the check changed. It was $100 per quarter that you didn't have an incident.
Right.
And then if you went all year without an incident, you got another $100 bonus, so a maximum of $500. Well, if you had one bonehead that got hurt 4 times in the year, you got nothing, even though you were working safe all year long.
Right.
So, luckily, we don't have one bonehead that's been hurt in all 4 quarters, thankfully, but that was well received. And then we are going to take the funding that was used for the safety incentive program to increase our safety awareness and training programs around here, because ultimately, getting a $500 check is nice, but going home with all your limbs is nicer. So, there were some people that grumbled about it, but ultimately, I think they understand that they have an impact on their own incentive now because it's tied to your performance evaluation.
Are we putting more responsibility on our superintendents?
Yes.
And people out in the field to make sure that people are safety conscious and safety prepared?
Well,
Whatever.
to that point, and I said earlier, I'm not part of the safety council. I did attend the safety council meeting this morning based off the changes we were making, and that was a discussion we had, was making sure that it is not just that person's fault that they're getting hurt if they're not trained in the right way and responsible for making sure what's going on.
Right.
So that is certainly something that was brought up this morning and was well received by the council, that if you're a supervisor or you're a crew member, it's incumbent on you not just to watch out for yourself, but for everybody else, and reminding them of good safety practices. And we do have some crew members that are very safety conscious, and they remind everybody, whether they're a supervisor or not. I've been out on job sites before and heard a crew member recommend to their supervisor, hey, you're not doing this right, you need to go get your PPE on and come back over here before we do this. So it's incumbent on all of us to work safe.
Right. Okay.
How often do we have defensive driving?
Once a year.
Once a year?
We do offensive driving once a year. We do confined space entry twice a year, but you don't go through it twice a year. We just split up the folks so that we don't have a huge group going. And then we do sexual harassment training once a year. So those are every single year. And then the Zenith that does our workers' comp has a safety portal that we are going to begin assigning individual classes to people based off their specific job that may be beneficial to them as well. It's an online portal. Most of the classes are 20 minutes, and they can take some of those and make sure we're providing additional training there as well.
And is that defensive driving mandatory
It is.
for all?
Anybody that drives a JWSC vehicle.
Is it voluntary for those who don't?
We have never opened it up to people that do not go, but we can certainly do that.
Is it a program that qualifies for discounts?
Yes.
With their own personal insurance?
I would assume it would, yes, sir. We do it because we get a discount on our insurance as a utility for having defensive driving training. So if they'll give us a discount, I'm sure they'll give the employees one as well, because they get a certificate for attending that.
How many, what's the percentage of those who drive vehicles versus those who don't?
I would say 80% of the folks here at some point will drive a JWSC vehicle. So we got over 100 people that go through defensive driving every year.
And we pay for the course per person?
We pay for the time. It's not, it's, they'll run up to X number of people in a day, and we just pay for that, whether we have 5 people go or 50 people go.
Might wanna consider opening that up
Yes.
to everyone.
That's a very good idea. We hadn't thought of that, but that's certainly something we could do.
Well, it helps out in the long run if, on an employee's own time, if they're safe, then they're more likely to show up to work.
Absolutely, and not only that, just because you don't drive a vehicle in your current position doesn't mean you may not get a position later down the road that where you have to drive a vehicle for a JWSC, so.
I got a question. This, our new policy for drug testing,
Yes, sir.
we're drug testing all JWC employees?
Everybody is involved in the random program. We're not gonna come in and say, today, all employees are getting drug tested, but your name goes in the hat.
At random, I meant randomly. So
Yes, sir.
everybody is
Everybody.
subject to random testing.
Everybody from the executive director to the newest guy on the construction
Who's gonna
crew.
administer our program?
Teamwork Services does all of the random. They send emails out to the superintendents of who's required, and then they go to the lab to get the test made.
Okay. Do you know who's our lab? Solaris,
Solaris, I think, is the lab that does it. The one over there on, right by Grandy's
Community Road?
Community Road, yes, sir. They
Um,
also do our pre-employment drug testing.
You said there were 6 drivers who, CDL, who, I guess, it was CDL, I guess. who had
Not all
accident.
of them, but most of them were, yes, sir.
Were? Okay. Well, I imagine we do drug testing for any type of accident.
Any accident gets drug tested, and if you're CDL, you have to go through a more stringent drug test. It's the DOT required drug test, and you are, according to policy, if you have an accident in a CDL vehicle and you're a CDL driver, you are off work until the results of this test come back.
Really?
Yes, sir. Usually it takes 2 days to get the test back. That is in our HR policies.
Pretty good.
Yes, sir.
It's pretty stringent, pretty good. You know, I agree with the stringent guidelines. If we're paying our employees, high premium dollars, they need to be, held accountable. So I agree with that.
We have drug-free workplace policies that apply to everybody, not just to CDL drivers, so we're
understand
gonna
that.
make everybody take part in that.
Okay.
I kind of have a request for you to look at something, the Safety Council look at something. I'm happy with, moving it back to the individual. But I'd kind of like to see if we can come up with a monetary amount as a special performance award for safety for people who are safety.
That can certainly be
But I
done.
would like that to run through the chain of command, meaning that if I'm a worker and I don't have any supervisory responsibility and I don't create any situation where an accident occurs due to my negligence, then I ought to get a little extra money for it. If I'm a team leader and I have employees under me, then I become responsible for making sure that all of them are safe. However, if I have somebody who does not comply, then I lose my safety bonus, so to speak, because one of my employees failed, and it may not be just one occurrence, you
Right.
have to look at it. And if I'm that employee's supervisor up to the director, that would apply all the way to where there's some sort of bonus at each level for ensuring the safety of your organization to enforce it. And I'm just sitting here thinking about this and I leave it to Commissioner Harvey. He's dealt with this stuff. Is that a workable plan?
It's a plan to be looked at, yes, sir. And I also, with that, I thought this safety program was basically an incentive for our employees to be safe, just giving them something added, and plus a morale booster as well. When you had it, when you say you're gonna cut it out, I just kind of looked at it that way.
Well, like I said, I discussed this with the Safety Council members, and you kind of look at it 2 ways. One of the things we were talking about this morning actually was doing some type of raffle, depending on, it gets you involved in that. If you haven't had any accidents, then you get additional raffle tickets versus somebody that's had accidents, stuff of that nature. But and this is rather blunt, but sometimes the safety incentive program incentivizes you not to report your accidents.
That too, it does, you're right.
Because, especially if you don't, when you're lumped in with 12 other people for your crew and you happen to strain your back and you can't really move around, you may be incentivized by other people not to
Not to
report your
report it.
back strain
Exactly, I understand.
because you're going to cost them money at that point. So we have reduced our injuries from our high of 3 or 4 years ago, but we have stagnated at our number of injuries in the past 3 years.
Non-reporting of accidents, if you have an incentive program, it's gonna be a problem.
Right,
And that's,
that's the reason, that's good, good.
and it wasn't, we're still going to provide the employees with benefits for working safe.
Yeah.
That's not something we're gonna go away from either a raffle program and also having that on your performance appraisal. Because if you, some people may, you know, that may be the thing that keeps them from having a 3 overall where you get no raise versus a 4 and you get a raise. And if you get 1 step and it's 1.5%, that could be well more than $500 for somebody, not just that year, but going forward.
Right. Well, I don't want to get into tweaking something so bad until we tweak it, until it really doesn't make any sense. It, you know, so basically, what we come up with, I think, let's keep it basic.
Yes, sir.
And just move forward with it.
Absolutely.
Is there some benefit to having the team watch out for one another?
Yes, sir. There is some benefit to that, and that was the goal with having the groups of making sure you're watching out for each other. The problem with having the groups is not all of our groups fit into that nice little box of having, I got 4 people in a truck that work together all day long. So for those people, certainly it helps incentivize them to look out for each other. But like the example with the meter readers, if we have an employee on the north end of the island versus an employee at exit 29, there's not a whole lot they can do to help out in that situation, so.
I think the supervisors and supervisory chain has to be responsible for safety. And,
We are fortunate that many of our employees are very safety-minded in that regard, and they're constantly telling their coworkers things that they need to improve on from a safety perspective.
I know we have problems with people wearing their PPE.
Yes.
Yeah, that's one that we have focused a lot on making sure we have happen, and where Safety Council is actually gonna start making site visits to individuals, not unannounced site visits, because it's real easy to work safe when you know they're coming.
Well, you need to also, when you cite that individual, is bring that supervisor in there while you're doing that, because that person is responsible just as well for sending that person out there not being prepared or equipped.
Absolutely,
Like supposed to.
absolutely.
So I agree with that.
I commend the safety council for
Yeah.
all their efforts.
It was, I got to see behind the curtain today. It's a very well-run organization we have there.
Okay, anything else?
That is all I have today.
Why don't we hold off looking at the personnel stuff in the executive section until
That's
this
fine.
afternoon's meeting?
That's fine.
Is that okay?
Me and you.
That's what we'll do. Okay. So if there's no other business, Chad, bring for us,
Sir.
meeting's adjourned. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you, really.
I appreciate it. And I'll get that information that, on the regional stuff, that's just gonna take a little more time to compile. You know how